Hey, you lovely people, let's talk about writing your essay. So while our checklist has a lot of different things you can consider, I really want to focus on three main suggestions as you write your draft. The most important thing is to think about your thesis. And like the book says, it's going to be complex and debatable. So that means that not everyone would agree with it, or whenever someone reads it, they might think, oh, wow, I didn't even consider that. I talked about this with a lot of you when we looked at your outlines. So just keep thinking about that. Are you addressing the question, what about this? Or for what reason? So let's say we started with the observation that author A shows the difference between apples and oranges. And to come up with a thesis, you would ask yourself, why? What are they trying to emphasize about that idea or people or life or apples or oranges? What are they saying about the apples and oranges by showing the difference between them? Or as another example, someone might look at a text and think, oh, author B uses a lot of symbolism to represent apples as women. A better thesis would explain why, right? What are they trying to say about women by representing them as apples, or what are they trying to say about life or men or whatever? So this leads us to suggestion number 2, which is don't start writing until your thesis is clear. Really know what you want to say. It's obvious if you don't know what you want to say and you just start writing, because the whole goal is to focus every paragraph around supporting your thesis. If you don't know what your thesis is, how can you support it? Number 3, now that you've figured out your thesis, is to make sure every paragraph supports that by analyzing and not summarizing. And we'll talk about what that means. So here's a paragraph based on one of the sections I made in my outline. Try to figure out what my point is. It says, in Cooper's essay, his mother is described as standing in the kitchen with her cigarette ashes dribbling into the sink, and he writes she turned her back on the rest of the house. He makes a sandwich and he hears her sigh. He describes her sigh as one plummeting note so long and weary it might have been her last. She would see things out her window like blimps and birds. Later, Cooper says she was wishing she could be happy where she was. In contrast, the father sighs in relief when his wife scratches his back. His sighs are described as gusty and loose, and that he let it ricochet like an echo as if he were shouting into a tunnel or cave. So this paragraph makes probably one of the biggest mistakes you can when you're writing an analysis essay, and that's it's providing all the evidence that you found, but it's not explaining what it's evidence of. Your job as the writer of this essay is to make it clear what each part of this puzzle means and how it all connects. So to move my paragraph from summarizing into analyzing, I'm going to follow these 3 steps. I'm going to use a topic sentence. I'm going to take out any unnecessary information, and then I'm going to use transitions that connect the ideas and repeat the main point with synonyms and pronouns so I can explain what things mean. So to come up with a topic sentence, ask yourself the question, how does this information connect to your thesis? So I need to figure out what the differences between the mother and father show about my thesis, which is, although much of Cooper's essay focuses on the fact that we are all connected, even though we're different, his fluctuation in diction, point of view, structure, and imagery emphasize the struggle of those who can't define their sexual identity. So I have to ask myself, what is the mother an example of, or what is the father an example of? What are the differences showing about that struggle? And based on the evidence I was looking for, I was thinking that the father fits more into society's perception of what is normal, and so his life seems easier, whereas the mother seems to struggle because she can't necessarily identify. So as you write each topic sentence, try to connect it to that idea that you're ultimately making. So for me, it's that idea of the struggle, right? So I use a phrase that says something like, one way this struggle is shown is through the different experience of Cooper's mother and father. The next step in being clearer is to take out any unnecessary information. So if I can, I should paraphrase something. This will let me condense into the most exact point I need to make. And then also think about whether or not you need an entire quote. The book talks about this too. Can I limit it to a 3-word phrase? This just helps me take out all the unnecessary stuff so that the reader can focus on the thing I really want them to. So I've identified here 2 lines that don't necessarily point to that struggle. I guess if I thought about it really hard, I might be able to do it, but they just don't seem necessary. And then as I look at each quote, I can think about, do I need all of these words? And I kind of think I do, since I was thinking about that as I wrote this. And you can see I have included just a couple word quotes here and there. But even the one I've highlighted here where it says, wishing she could be happy where she was, I could think, could I just keep it as wishing she could be happy? Or does the where she was add on to that idea? And I think it does, because it references into their house and their relationship. So I'm going to keep it. Once I've got my topic sentence and I've taken out anything that's not necessary, I can start thinking about connecting all my ideas with explanation, transitions, and analysis. So you can see, while maybe it's not the best sounding because I'm too lazy to make it sound good right now, but I've highlighted in yellow the things I've added that show the analysis part. So that connects it with transitions and the repetition of that idea that she's unhappy and he's not. So after the thesis, it says the first way this is done is through showing the dad as satisfied and the mother is unsatisfied. This also comes through with the imagery. For example, the mother is shown as sad, as a sad image, looking out the window with the cigarette ashes dribbling in the sink. He even says she'd turn her back on the rest of the house, which shows she isn't happy with her husband. Even the diction Cooper uses to describe her sigh is negative, one plummeting note so long and weary it might have been her last. Still later, Cooper shows her dissatisfaction with her life by saying she was wishing she could be happy where she was. All these directly connect to her unhappiness with her living situation. In contrast, his father seems happy because his needs are met. This is proven with his wife when his wife finds the place on his back that he needs scratched. His sighs are described as gusty and loose, and that he let it ricochet like an echo as if he were shouting into a cave or tunnel. This portrays his sigh as adventurous and exciting, when hers point to those of someone who is bored and unsatisfied. So you can see there isn't a single piece of evidence that isn't explained or connected. So that's what you want. Explain everything, connect everything. I think that's it for now. I mean, the biggest thing is to really make sure you're being clear. And then later you can think about a good attention-getting introduction and a conclusion that might wrap it up well. But really for me, the most important part is that as I'm reading through this essay, I know exactly what point you're making and why.